Hey everybody, welcome to week 3. We're going to be talking about evidence-based practice this week and PICO questions and really dive into searching for articles. I know that's not always the most fun thing to do, but I've got a little lecture here to hopefully help with that. So this week we're going to be looking at chapter 10. Chapter 10 is a very large chapter in Hood. It goes a little bit more in depth than I would like to. I wouldn't say more in depth, sorry. It has a few more topics than I would like to touch this week. So if you go back to the D2L page, it shows you which pages I want you to read, because the second part of the chapter will be part of another week that's coming up. It talks about nursing theories, and I felt like that was just too much information for one week. So this week we're going to be talking about finding evidence and PICO questions. Your book talks about the research process. How do we even start? I think that's one of the hardest parts of research is, so if you think about what raises questions, maybe you work in a nursing home, maybe you work on a hospital floor in a surgery center. What raises questions? Do you have a high infection rate? Is there a high fall rate? What do we need to improve on in nursing? So then we're going to do a systematic investigation of the question. And that really just means, hey, we're going to do a literature review. We're going to go see what evidence is out there and what we can implement. We're going to gather the evidence, discover some answers, and then report our findings. And hopefully, throughout this research process, that'll generate future questions for more research. You do need to know the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. Sometimes research articles include both. Sometimes it's one or the other. So the easiest one, I think, is quantitative. The second one I have listed there. It relies on numerical operations to explain and make predictions. A good example of this would be, for example, diabetes. If you're looking at people with type 2 diabetes, maybe you're looking at their weight or their age. What's the typical age that people get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes? Or maybe you're looking at their weights. So that would be quantitative research. Qualitative research really looks more at the human subjective experiences. So how they feel. You could look at a lot of mental health things as far as qualitative goes, but it's not numbers. It's a little bit more broad than that. So make sure you understand the difference between those two. We need to develop a systematic approach to searching. Searching can take hours if you don't know exactly what you're doing. A little plug for the library here. We have a great library here at EIU, a great library staff. So as you're searching databases, if you're stuck or need some help, send them an email, call them. They're very helpful. A lot of times if you have to request articles, it really doesn't take that long. I also teach a class here at EIU on campus, and we look up articles, and one student had requested an article, and by the end of the class period, she had the article sent to her. That's pretty untypical, I will tell you that. It's usually not that fast, but they're pretty quick. So give them a call. Don't be afraid to reach out to them. When you go, I think I have the link on the next slide, but when you go into our library, a couple of the main databases that students use are CINAHL and PubMed. You might start looking there. You need to have a well thought out PICO question. Book talks a lot about a PICO question. You need to break it down into a population. So you have to have something that you're looking at. If you work in an OR, maybe you're saying inpatient in the OR. If you work at a nursing home, you could say, inpatients over 75 in a nursing home, or just patients in the nursing home. But you need to have a specific population that you're looking for. Then you need to have an intervention. What are we researching? You want to compare it to something else? And what are the outcomes that are going to be expected? Time you can also put on there if that's appropriate. Sometimes that's not appropriate. I recently did a DMP project on diabetes. My PICO question, let's see if I can remember it, was in patients with type 2 diabetes, what is the effect of weekly education? So that was my intervention, compared to no education on their self-efficacy and general knowledge about diabetes. So I had all these people, and some of them I gave education and some of them I didn't. Seems pretty simple, right? I think students get too caught up in research that it can't be simple, but that's simple. I mean, you probably know what the outcome of that was going to be, right? People who got the education were probably going to do better. So research doesn't have to be crazy complicated, but that's an example of a PICO question. Here's another one. In OR nurses doing 5-minute scrub, so there's your population, that's pretty specific. Okay, OR nurses who do a 5-minute scrub. What are the differences in presence and type of microbes found on natural nail polish and nail beds compared to artificial nails? I think they could have put, it would have made more sense if they would have put compared to artificial nails at the time of surgery. So you've got a comparison there. So what's the outcome of this situation when you compare these two things? Okay, so it's an example of a PICO question. You can find examples of PICO questions. You can Google PICO questions. You can look in your book. There's PICO questions. But I really challenge you to think about something that you work, where you work, and think of a PICO question and email it to me. If you have a question before you go ahead and type that in, before you put it on the discussion board, this is part of your discussion board this week, email it to me. Hey, Dr. Gass, does this sound like an appropriate PICO question? I'll tell you, last semester, about 50% of the people who emailed me, it wasn't right. And I told them, hey, what about this? So don't hesitate to reach out and let's look at it and make sure you're on the right track. How do you find articles? Here is the link to the Booth Library. You can click on databases. Like I said, we a lot of times use CINAHL and PubMed. So a few rules I have is to limit your search options. You want to have something written by a nurse if you can, because really we're not trying to change the healthcare setting in general. We're trying to change what we do as nurses. Most of those are written by a nurse, most of those articles. It needs to be more than one page. I don't want just some excerpt that's just out there. I want an actual article. It should be peer reviewed. It needs to be from the United States, and it should be in the last 5 years. Now, if you find an article that is just mind-blowing, and it was from 6 years ago, or maybe it was from Canada or something, send it to me. Say, hey, can I use this for my paper? We have a paper coming up towards the end. Actually, I would encourage you to go look at that paper and maybe use this PICO question for that paper. Look ahead. It does have to do with some evidence-based practice. So let's kill two birds with one stone here. Look ahead and see if you can use this PICO question for that paper. Okay? Again, I talked about this a little bit. Don't try to save the world. Research can be so simple. It should really be focused on what you're doing as a nurse, so relate it to where you're working. All medications go through research. Research is all around us, but that's really not something that nurses research, right? That's something the medication companies research. Nurses don't really prescribe medications. We give them. So if you want to do research around medications, it would have to be something within the realm of nursing. But what type of research do nurses do? It's all up to where you work and what you can think of with where you work. So email me some ideas. I'd be happy to look at them, and we can figure something out for that project. And for this PICO question, I'm trying to think off the top of my head some that I had last semester. I've had students do some hand washing. I had a student do a PICO question on the effect of having hand sanitizer on the computers with wheels. It's simple, right? That's simple. So start to think about that. Shoot me some emails. I'd be happy to look at them before you post them in the discussion board. I'll be looking through the discussion boards too, and hopefully making some corrections if anybody has them wrong as well. I liked this statement. Research utilization may be as simple as one nurse changing individual practice based on what they read in a research article. So you can learn a lot by reading those research articles and coming up with some ideas. So let me know if you guys have questions. Email me. You've got my office phone number and my cell phone number if you have an emergency. But let's get going on these PICO questions and get started. Have a great week.